be seated, everyone. Shabbat Shalom Varach. Oh, Chevra, it's good to see everyone. Shabbat Shalom. A good sweet Shabbat for our guests and those here celebrating and our regulars. So, Chevra, once again, I'm pulling rabbinic privilege, and I'm going to offer a Devar Torah this Shabbos, not our usual discussion. I'm going to do a little teaching here, because there's been another important issue that came up that I'm not sure everyone's aware of. And I imagine if you look on the opposite side of your bulletin, I hope it's on there. It's a letter to the editor that was submitted by 18 rabbis, a very auspicious number in the Jewish community. 18 means chai. Across the triangle primarily, but really across the state of North Carolina, that came out right before Passover. And I want to talk about it here in the context of this Torah portion. Because people have been asking me, what was this about? How did it happen? Came before Passover, and not everyone had the chance to see it. It appeared across the state in both the Charlotte Observer and the News and Disturber, as they say. All right? Nuisance and Disturber, as Henry would tell me. All right, Nuisance and Disturber, it came in as well. What's this about? So follow me here. This Torah portion, Shemini, is dealing primarily, as our Bar Mitzvah said beautifully, about issues around kashrut, no question. But there is a mention, and it was mentioned on our Rabbi Mitzvah as well, about this very unique incident in the Torah, which is one of our biggest tragedies in the Torah, okay? In charge of all of the sacrifices in the book of Leviticus, obviously Moshe is in charge, but his brother is the high priest. What's his name? Aaron, Aharon HaKohen. Aaron's in charge. Now, Aaron has the institution of the sacrifices. This is a big deal. It's not just offering, sorry for the vegetarians in the house, okay, animals and offering food. It is the way we connect to the divine. It is the way we, quote unquote, satisfy God's needs. It's a very powerful institution. And not only is it representing Aaron and his family, but it's representing the entirety of the Israelite people. So he has a lot of power. Well, when he goes to offer his children the opportunity to offer some sacrifices, a first shot, their names are Nadav and Avihu. Some of you have heard it because it's actually mentioned a few times in the Torah, but it comes up in this parsha specifically. They offer, according to the Torah, alien fire, meaning fire it's not appropriate, and immediately they get burned. Like it's kind of described, this vision, it's tragic, as like a fireball comes out of the sky and kills them immediately. And right afterwards it says, and Aaron, Vayidom Aaron, Aaron was silent. Now, the tragedy of the death of children, that is its own passion, that's its own Devar Torah and its own tragedy. That's not what I'm focusing upon here. The issue that commentators get into is why? Like, they made a mistake, fine. They didn't do the right sacrifices, but they're kids. They're training from their father primarily. Kids make mistakes. They might have been teenagers, some commentators believe. Teenagers make mistakes. Teenagers make foolish errors. Let them learn. Why do they need the fire, kind of, God forbid, to destroy, to kill them, okay? Again, the commentators get into it. Some of them say it's because of their hubris. They were so kind of arrogant to offer fire that they thought like, oh, Dad doesn't know how to do it. I know how to do it better. And they just kind of did it. They also didn't do it as God described. Most of the sacrifices, if not all of them, God says, do it this way. And Aaron does exactly what it said. In this case, they offered what they thought was best. Kind of a teenagey thing to do, okay? But they said, no, that's not the right thing to do. Some say that basically, in general, they're just kind of lacking boundaries or they're uneducated. But a beautiful commentary by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Alav Shalom, is he explains that prayer, religion, spirituality, Judaism has a lot of fire in it. It has the fire of the yearning of the soul, okay? There's a fire in religion. There's a power in religion, in the institution of religion. And we know that fire has two possibilities. Fire can warm us on a cold night, but too much fire, and you burn. Which he basically is saying, now I'm taking one step further, when you are in charge of an institution, you have the fire power of the community, of the resources of the community, the economic resources, the spiritual resources, the people resources, the institutional resources, the physical resources, and that can give energy and fire to fuel a community. but used inappropriately, it can burn the community. Where am I going? Right now, the Trump administration has the power of the federal government. There's a lot of fire in that. And whether we agree on every single policy, when someone's in charge of the levers of government of power, for example, determining the $900 billion defense budget, there's a lot of literal fire in that either warms or it burns. Now, one particular area this of concern and sensitivity to us in recent times, and why this letter was signed by 18, both me and Rabbi Jenny, is the issue of what's happening. It's close to home here, particularly because we are so full with college campuses. Now, this is happening across the country. It's not just in our area, but obviously we are the triangle. This is our wheelhouse. This is many people in our congregation are connected to these, not to mention the youth, but also the professionals, teachers, administrators, etc. So what's going on? I think you're pretty aware that the Trump administration is using anti-Semitism, which no one denies is occurring on college campuses, but using that as an opportunity, explanation, etc., to deny visas, to change visas, to detain people, to try to expel people without honoring their civil rights. Now, I want to come back for a second and just take a pause. Let's be clear. Nobody knows as well as this congregation and these rabbis that there's anti-Semitism in the United States of America. And I have talked about this from this bima numerous times. So just to give you one example from my childhood, which I'll never forget, but some of these kids have already heard before, so don't be bored by it, okay? But I've told it before, is that I'll never forget in my high school in Columbia, Maryland, which was a generally very welcoming and opening high school. However, I'll never forget when I walked into my English class one day and 3 kids, as I'm about to walk out, took pennies and threw them at my feet and said, "Jew," picked them up. Now, at the time, I was like 16, I was so shocked. I remember when they did it, I was like, what? The whole thing was like, what are they thinking? But the whole thing happened, I never had something that happened in my entire life. I was completely shocked by the whole thing. I didn't even know what to do. And I remember going back to my parents that night, I was like, do you guys, what? And my parents had to explain the nasty, the stereotypes, disgusting, et cetera. And this was a play on that. And I've told you in the past here from this bima how my mother, as a public school teacher at her school, which generally speaking was very welcoming and supportive, but one day, one student put "Solomon is a Jew" over the entrance to her high school. I know anti-Semitism exists, and I've seen in downtown Raleigh over the past of this year, or a year and 2.5, unfortunately, there have been quote-unquote anti-war and pro-Palestinian rallies which have moved way beyond supporting whatever it is about the war into depictions of Jews, the Jewish community, the Jewish star, Nazi symbolism, whatever, that is way beyond, over the top, and directly attacks on the Jewish community, us. Here, we've had bomb threats on this synagogue, here, across the triangle as well. And everyone knows that the anti-Semitic flyers that I picked up walking on Shabbat home from shul with my daughter, that targeted Jewish Americans. It was with basically in the gun sights, we'll say, something like this on the flyers. Disgusting. This is anti-Semitism. And on college campuses, including some in the Triangle, but definitely been more pronounced and more media-focused up at Columbia and other places, there have been Jewish students have been scared to publicly identify as being Jewish, wear Jewish stars, for example, or even stop from going to classes, like can't walk on the campus. This is totally separate than one's right to protest. So is there a problem of anti-Semitism and an inability to kind of recognize this kind of line and sensitivity to Jewish students? Yes, 100%. Everybody agrees that if these type of things were happening to other communities, There's just, the double standard is so glaring, it's beyond the pale, it makes you want to vomit, okay? We have a problem. However, the question is, what's the solution? If the solution is to trample on civil rights of people, then we have a problem in the Jewish community. There's a very famous story, and I'm sure some of you know this from the Midwest, and I'm thinking of some of our professors here who are from Chicago, of the Skokie, Illinois neo-Nazi parade, I don't know what you call it. This is from, I think, the 60s, 70s. When the neo-Nazis wanted to parade in a super Jewish Holocaust survivor neighborhood called Skokie, right in the face of Shoah survivors, horrific. The Supreme Court decided, made it, even if the speech is repulsive, and believe me, it was, it's permitted by the First Amendment as long it is not violent, etc., doesn't cause harm, allows for alternative voices, it's controlled with the police, etc. As long it's permitted. Disgusting voice, disgusting language is Americanly protected, thank God. And the problem is, if the government starts deciding, well, no, this language is over the pale and not this one, the problem with that is it starts here, but where are they going to decide next it's not okay? Is it not okay for someone in the Jewish community at some point to present our Jewish identity in a way that other people don't like for some reason? Perhaps we want to express our Jewishness at a time where it's a Christian holiday, but we shouldn't do that for some reason. It sounds crazy to imagine, but if the government starts picking sides on which voices are allowed and not, that's a trampling on the basic issues of our Constitution and puts our community at risk. So let me come back and say, each individual student and what's happening here, I don't know every single detail, and it's possible that there is some criminal behavior in some of those cases that should be worthy of being expelled from our country. I don't know. But that should be clear, transparent, and proven in a court of law for everybody to see, what we call due process. And without due process, it's bad for the Jewish community, and it's really bad for all Americans. Because of that, 18 rabbis here in North Carolina signed this letter to the editor that says, basically, we of course decry anti-Semitism, duh, okay? That needs to be addressed. But how it's addressed is not by expelling particular people who give opinions that I admit I find repulsive myself, I don't agree. But that's not that is un-American without due process to expel them. So come back. Nadav and Avihu had the fire of the institution of the worship of the sacrifices. It had a lot of power in their hands, but they used it wrong, and they burned. What I would say here is that we have to be very careful. We know the goal is to eliminate anti-Semitism on our campuses, among other places, but the way it's done has to be done very, very carefully, or we, in the end, we could be burned. We want to preserve everyone's civil rights. And here's my last piece, which has been brought to me as well. Some people are concerned that if it comes back that this continued process happens in the explanation, why we're expelling, is because of anti-Semitism, is that some people, unfortunately, will say, what's the problem with this government today, how they're acting? They're being controlled by the Jews. That's not what we want. That's not what we want this to be controlled by the Supreme Court, by our institutions. We don't want this because we got our little, we want it because everybody gets it. That's in the best interest of the Jewish community, and that's the best interest of the United States. So when you see this document in the back, and I invite you if you'd like to offer your opinions, I know 2 Jews, 3 opinions, okay? Then you can come speak to me at the Kiddush or send me an email, okay? We're not having an open discussion here right now, all right? But you want to know why that was, because people have been asking me, what's this letter, where'd it come from, what's it about, blah, 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 what's all about, Michigas? That's what it's about. Ultimately, I too want to protect the Jewish community, but I'm not going to doing it by burning our democracy. That's the message, I believe, of Shmini and Nadav and Avihu. Tov. Shabbat shalom, Barach. Shabbat shalom. With that, we turn